For obvious reasons, at this time last night, we were paying attention to the incredible events that were taking place in Israel. And as you have seen 100 times, may I be the 101st to show you the happy moments when people finally got to be reunited with their families after the terror of being in a tunnel for 2 years.
מתוק שלי, בוא, אמא שלך פה, אוי נמרוד.
Full on. That one in particular got me because that young man was being reunited with his father, the bloke with the glasses, who tried to learn to walk again and to be able to talk again after his son had been captured, and he wanted to be able to meet him by being able to stand. He was able to stand, but not able to talk that much. Incredible about the difficulties in people's lives, no doubt as well. The great difficulty of the next little while is everyone in all of that part of the world trying to put themselves back together. But obviously the only reason this took place was because of Donald Trump. Now, you can like or dislike the orange man, but I tell you what, he's played a blinder in the past 24 hours because not only was he lapping it up in Israel, but also he was locking in basically every country in the area or has been historically in the area to back peace. We're talking about Qatar, that has been more than happy to let Hamas officials live in their cities. The only exception is Iran, for obvious reasons, not doing any deals with the United States. But the diplomacy here is unbelievable to see. Now, again, no one knows what happens tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. But let's be really clear. When previous peace deals had been done, even when they were done with Israeli prime ministers who ended up getting assassinated in part because of the deal that they had done, nobody looks back and turns around and says, oh, well, then the deal is void. The moment of triumph for the president is obvious, but it is incredible to see the sort of passive-aggressive take that much of the world's media has put on this. The past 24 hours have been unadulteratedly good. They've been unadulteratedly good for the people of Israel because they got their people back, and unadulteratedly good for the people of Gaza because the bombs have stopped. This means for a brief moment in time, the harshest of enemies were able to breathe the same air at the same time, and it was a sense of relief. Yet have a look at how the media, always whenever it's Trump, wants to bring an asterisk and put a dirty big asterisk next to the achievements of a president who has clearly outperformed his predecessor and clearly stands above many of his other predecessors in terms of the depth and scope of the deal that he has done. Again, I don't know what happens next week, but no one does. But how hard is it for these people to turn around and see what they have seen with their own eyes and give credit to the bloke who made it happen?
You know, we welcome the truly historic commitment and the Trump peace agreement. We support and stand behind President Trump's sincere efforts.
It's going to hold up.
It's going to hold up, he says. That summit there in Egypt capping off a momentous day.
We don't exactly know what the things were that he signed, but they purported to be related to the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire deal.
Nothing has been ironed out. Nothing has been agreed to because you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. But Trump's strategy is the exact opposite. If you overpromise, people will have to deliver. What he has done is put the cart before the horse. There's absolutely no peace agreement. There's a ceasefire. There's no understanding of how Gaza will be ruled.
The reality of life, if you are somebody who wants to observe it in daily format, in formats like this or the ones that I've just shown you, is that sometimes there are days that are clearly bigger than others. There are days that are slowly one more straw on a camel's back, and then there are days where there is a giant pivot, where the tectonic plates of the world, as big or as small as the topic may be, do actually move. And yesterday was one of those days. Now, you can go back to hating him tomorrow. You can have not voted for him yesterday, but how can anyone not conclude that what has happened in the past 24 hours is pretty exceptional to see, creates great difficulties, no doubt, because Now that people are back to the beginnings of everyday life, it can be incredibly difficult for the people who may well have the survivor's guilt or those that are trying to go through the rubble to find the remains of their family members. And one thing that we absolutely have to remember, and in my view, that we are lucky enough to celebrate, is that we didn't do anything special to get born here. But I'm one of millions of people who are bloody thankful that we were, very lucky that we were. And yes, there have been times where it has been easier to look away, and I've been one of the people that's not talking about it all day, every day, because this country is the focus. But this is one of those days where if you are lucky enough to be born here, you get to go, geez, thank goodness. If you're somebody who's come to the country, you again get the ability to say, how good is this? But equally, if you're somebody who wants to drag the issues of other parts of the world and try to make them everything in this part of the world, may you be reminded of your surroundings, which are pretty freaking good. That being Australia. Now, before I get into all of the obvious, can I just give a yay for the day, a trophy, a gold medal, a big thumbs up, a gold star from the news agency to one of my favourite politicians in the country, Leah Finocchiaro. Now, she is the CLP leader. She is the Northern Territory's Chief Minister. She's somebody we backed in for a long time. Years before she became the leader, we talked to her on the show as an aspiring politician, an aspiring leader. We've seen her face to face a couple of times in Darwin and spoken to her many times across her journey. Well, I tell you what, yet again today, after becoming the leader, she shows us the rock star that she is. Again, just like I told you last week, let's look for hope. Every Liberal was getting hope out of James Patterson last week. And while I'm not a Liberal, those that are, of course, people who prefer them to the Labor Party, let's be very clear. There is hope on the horizon, and the horizon today comes from the far north, comes from beautiful Darwin. Because today, the Chief Minister made it very clear. There will be no bending of the rules about who ends up in a male or a female prison, or as she puts it, in the best way someone from Darwin can.
Here in the Northern Territory, if you're a bloke, you go to a men's prison. If you're a woman, you go to women's prison.
And by the way, for the polite people that are saying, well, you can talk like that because it's Darwin. You can talk like that anywhere in the country. And for those that will be deeply offended by what she said, no, clarity, right? Good, clean, moral clarity that exists inside political leadership. And it is not a fluke, because in the past, when people were tut-tutting back in the start of September, and they were tut-tutting the idea that women, before they are victims of crime in the Northern Territory, would be able to defend themselves with things like pepper spray. This, again, is the clarity of the type of person that I would love to be leading a place like Victoria, and compare her attitude in Darwin to Jacinta Allen's in Victoria. Well, compare the pair, as they say.
From today, you will be able to legally purchase pepper spray for your own self-defence, to buy you time to get away, so that you don't have to scrape and scramble for the stick or the rock to defend yourself, so that you don't have to end up in hand-to-hand combat with someone who's formed that view to hurt you.
She's a rock star, honestly, just into her 40s, right? Huge political career locally, and then hopefully a huge one in Canberra. The people in charge of the centre-right of politics study what she's doing. She's fantastic at what she's doing. She's fantastic at the message that she puts out, and she's fantastic in the clear decisions she is making, talking like a normal person. Sometimes things are black and white, no matter how often polite society would like to introduce as much grey, when sometimes there is black and white, sometimes there is the good and bad. Like, what about when she was giving it to the protesters who were having a go at a mining conference? She kind of worked out that they weren't many locals that were blowing up.
And the activists standing out the front, you are wasting your time. Go back to Victoria or wherever else you want to cause trouble, but you are not welcome here.
Leah Finocchiaro, that's a rock star. That's a political rock star. She's always welcome on this program, but I want the rest of the country to know what we have known for a long time. She is a star. The endless debate in this country about which way to go when it comes to net zero. Now, according to Chris Bowen, according to the Prime Minister, net zero equals climate change, and if you don't want to do net zero, then somehow you don't want to do anything about climate change, and therefore you are on the wrong side of history. You will doom our country to an endless world of intense bushfires and floods, and forget what history tells you. There is no piece of paper that can prove that Australia acting alone will not be able to change the weather. The reality, of course, is that we're 1% of the world's problems. Matt Canavan, of course, he's arguing the opposite. He's arguing that a country like Australia does not have to cut off one arm, does not have to hop on one leg in order to genuflect in the way of the people who are not doing much work. Remember, Australia, 1% of the problem, China, 33% of the problem. All of what we produce snapped up by China in just over 2 weeks. But nothing to see here. Now, I have been somebody who has been led by the data and the past 2 federal elections, but certainly the most recent federal election, to suggest that, OK, maybe something has cracked. Maybe we have moved to a position where, unless you have some sort of a position that is different than the dump net zero position, then you're never going to win an election again. Now, remember, that's different from should we have a net zero position, which again, my position is, well, you're 1% of the world's problem, you're not going to be able to fix anything. But is there something, while the number of people who believe in God has gone like this, the number of people who believe in the environment has gone like that maybe something has changed in the Australian population? There are 2 very different things between what you believe and what would be a political result. So for the past couple of nights, I've been fascinated by an opinion poll which was done by our mate Cos Samaras for the Redbridge Group, published in the Australian Financial Review. It shows, basically, the same number of people would like the Liberal Party to drop, or the coalition to drop net zero 2050, as the same number of people who say don't drop it. So the question becomes 26%. Now, this grey area of don't know, are these the same people who sat in the don't know column when it came to the Voice? They were the difference between 60-40 yes and 60-40 no. Which way are these people leaning? Because once you actually look a little deeper into this, again, should the coalition abandon net zero? All voters, 37% yes, no, 37% not sure, 26%. Majority of coalition voters say, yeah, let's get rid of it. 24% say no, 22% are not sure. So, OK, is there some opportunity? All right. If you decide to get rid of it, are there people who agree with you who wouldn't otherwise vote for you? Well, 23% of Labor people claim that the coalition should get rid of net zero. Now, again, very particular words that are used here, right? Which is, do they want the coalition to get rid of net zero because they think it's better for Labor, better for the Greens? I don't know. We'll ask Cos, the man behind this here, because this is probably the only data in the market that actually tells us where the opportunities are of abandoning net zero or sticking by it but finding a different way to get there. In terms of the age groups, 47% of Gen Z say no, 43% of millennials say no, but then it flips. Once you start to move towards Gen X, so sort of 35 and above, millennials, which is 35 and above, sort of cusp is about 45 for Gen Xers. That's 39% saying yes, 50% are baby boomers. But again, a third of millennials and a bit less than 1 in 5 Gen Z. Is that areas that could be open for discussion? 35% in that grey area. 28, 19. Are they up for grabs? Are they being too polite? Are they answering the not understanding the question? We'll all find out together. Cos Samaras, head of the Redbridge Group, he'll join us before we are done tonight. If you care about whether the coalition should or shouldn't have net zero, a must-watch conversation. Susan Lee has decided to get involved, and rightly so, about the madness that has been Lydia Thorpe of the past couple of days. Before the events in Israel took over much of the news headlines, it felt like what we were going to be talking about this week was going to be her comments. Susan Lee, in her letter to the Federal Parliament today, has said to the presiding officers, i.e. the people technically in charge of the Senate or the House, like as a machine. Dear presiding officers, on Sunday the 12th of October, Australians witnessed Victorian Senator Lydia Thorpe espouse political violence against our nation's parliament. We ask you to urgently investigate the credibility of Senator Thorpe's threats and the imputations of her comments. Just last week, a man was arrested for threatening to kill the Prime Minister, while many candidates were also threatened throughout the 2025 election. Remember what police had alleged, of course, about a young person in relation to Peter Dutton. That's me adding to the statement. If you have somehow forgotten, this is what Lydia Thorpe said. Now, of course, we have to say that she's speaking in a metaphor, but the metaphor's not very subtle.
And if I have to burn down Parliament House...
And it wasn't just us who noticed.
The independent senator attracting widespread condemnation for threatening to burn down Parliament House.
But as always, Lydia Thorpe has an excuse. No, it is not a long-term concussion or other injuries related to her time in the netball field. She did not produce the psychologist's report like she has in the past. But my rally remarks were clearly a figure of speech, a metaphor for the pain in our communities and the urgent need to end genocide in Palestine and in everywhere. I'm still waiting for her thank you, President Trump, but they are obviously not a literal threat. This mock outrage is ridiculous. People are dying and starving in Gaza. Again, I'm waiting for the thank you, President Trump. Politicians in the media once again clutching their pearls and chasing a scandal instead of focusing on what really matters. Oh, yeah, we've all got it wrong, haven't we, Lydia? Because, of course, you were just speaking metaphorically. And again, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that you were speaking metaphorically. But what you always seem to espouse is a want to be both part of a system that pays your wage, which is quite handsome. And when you get re-elected for 6 years as a senator, you're talking closer to $1.2 million in salary than maybe $600,000 for a lower house MP. You are happy to be part of a system that you want to actively tear down from inside. That's having a bet both ways. That's not going to a protest and speaking from the outside. That, again, is, trying to have all of the power, all of the responsibility, all of the money that comes with being part of the federal parliament while simultaneously saying that you want to metaphorically tear it down. And what about the way the Labor Party has responded to this? Now, again, before things started to take over in the Middle East, there was much conversation that had to be had about Tony Burke. Now, we know that Tony Burke, just they need Lydia Thorpe's vote in the upper house just in case, for whatever reason, the Greens don't maybe turn up. And the former Green and Jackie Lambie and the crossbenchers you needed to give him a tickle every now and then. So how hard was the kick? Well, this is it from the Home Affairs Minister. You judge how serious he was.
Sometimes when a comment's like this is made, or a comment that's offensive is made, the natural instinct is let's all increase the pressure. All I'm saying is I don't think that's in the interest of social cohesion.
Okay, anything about the specific comment or the specific senator? Take two, give it another go.
Of course they're not. They speak for themselves. I just don't think there's any benefit, and certainly not benefit to social cohesion in me responding by getting angrier and ramping it up.
Yeah, because that would be your response if it was somebody from One Nation, wouldn't it be, Minister? You wouldn't get angry, you wouldn't use their name, you wouldn't use the comments, you wouldn't weaponise them from the Labor Party. What a surprise. When the comments come from either somebody that they want to rely upon as maybe a vote in the Senate, or they come from the left, hoping that those people, if they don't give the vote preference immediately to, will eventually say that the lesser of two evils is the Labor Party, hands off, soft gloves. Again, if it had been a One Nation senator, imagine the reaction. Imagine the carrying on. And speaking of Pauline Hanson, her statement too on this particular issue. Interesting to read. Senator Thorpe's insightful remarks are both a threat to public order and community safety. I would argue that they're an act of treason and terrorism and should be thoroughly investigated by the federal police. Well, the federal police are investigating. I've got a little feeling that, of course, they will say, well, look, it's not the most perfect thing to say, but clearly it was a metaphor. But watch this space. Kid gloves, as always, for Lydia Thorpe. Brass knuckles, if it's for anyone politically that they don't like. Which brings me to the beautiful city of Parramatta in Sydney's west. Now, this is a very Sydney media thing, but there has been the sort of more lefty newspapers that have decided to start defining Western Sydney at the moment. They've just discovered it in 2025. They're trying to decide where the second major capital city is of Sydney. Well, it's Parramatta. It's always been Parramatta, and was Parramatta when you used to be able to go and see movies at the Roxy Theatre. Okay? That's the reality. It has always ever been Sydney's second major CBD. And in Parramatta, there is quite a significant Indian community, a diaspora that in fact is so significant, the Parramatta Council has renamed parts of the city to be Little India. Great, cool. And as we know, Indian community, really important, shares many of our values, no question about it. But we also know that when Kosamaris put out some data about where that diaspora was voting, it was commented upon. It was commented upon, among others, by Jacinta Price. And it wasn't hard to conclude that when there is a very significant number of people and there's a very significant number of Labor seats, well, guess which way some are voting. Now, this is a story that is very old and was beaten up within an inch of its life. Remember, more than a month ago. Oh, this was a 24-hour up and down that the Labor Party, because unlike Lydia Thorpe, right? Lydia Thorpe, quick, shh, move on. Look over here. But this one, they tried to just keep fanning and keeping it. And you know what? The media loving it. They kept going and going, and we got into an end of a first week and into a second week. And once we thought this thing was behind us, guess what? Parramatta City Council debated last night a motion which was not just to stand against the caricature version of the comments that had been made based off the data of our mate Cos. But councillors, according to this motion, have received numerous messages from the community expressing their disappointment that political leaders would make irresponsible statements and undermine community harmony. They were demanding an apology. Now, how this was going to work when, don't forget, you've got a senator who represents the Northern Territory, of which Parramatta is not part, of which the councillors do not have any role overseeing, yet they were demanding an apology. Well, they had their meeting last night, and the person who was behind re-energising this story, hoping that it would never make it to national news, instead it would stay in the Parramatta news groups or in the local paper, was a Labor councillor. What a surprise, the Labor Party was trying to keep this thing going. Well, a Liberal councillor of Indian descent was one of many who decided to absolutely give it to this Labor Party bloke who clearly was just trying to breathe fire into an old story. One of the Liberal councillors, again of Indian heritage, blasted the motion and said the council has got much better things to deal with instead of treating the topic like the world's come to an end. It's been almost 4 weeks. Well said. I think we've got much more better issues to deal with. It's a federal issue. I don't know why he wants to bring it down here. The way you brought it forward, I feel like you're just trying to divide communities after everything went under the carpet. Correct. So how did they vote? Do we have to have a formal apology from Senator Lydia Thorpe to the Indian diaspora of the Parramatta City Council? Thankfully, no. Because it ended up getting changed. Rather than just rejected, it got changed. Lydia Thorpe, my apologies. Jacinta Price's name removed from it. Liberal senator removed from it. Instead, this is what they ended up voting in favour of. The council agreed to acknowledge the Indian community's contribution to the city and affirmed its commitment to multiculturalism. Easiest vote any of them have ever taken, but the purpose and the point was to keep this thing alive. We will talk about not quite that, but some of the data and all the rest of it again with Cos in a couple of minutes' time. Now, there's a little story for those of us who like to go travelling that I want to talk about here, and it is a change to Virgin Airlines. Now, you know how much I love flying around on the big V? Love it, right? Well, Australians have slowly but surely started to take the piss when it comes to the amount of luggage that we are putting up and above us. Now, what is supposed to be a small little bag or a day bag is now turning into 4 different cricket kits that people are shoving in. And because people get on before you get on, they take up the space that you should have above your head for your bags. Well, I mentioned the big V. Well, Virgin Airlines announced today that there is going to be some major changes to the carry-on policy, basically effective immediately, and it all makes perfect sense. Virgin Australia has announced changes to its carry-on luggage policy that will see the weight allowance increased, but the number of items that are brought on board reduced. Okay, here's the rule if you get on a Virgin flight anytime soon. From February 2, economy passengers are allowed to carry a single item up to 8 kilos. Repeat, single item up to 8 kilos. Yes, you are also allowed a handbag or a laptop, but you're not allowed to take 2 cases on, okay? 1 bag, 8 kilos, that's enough. God love Virgin and all the people who bring change to it each and every day.